And you talked about the cultural change, and I'm curious. There's been a lot of conversation, certainly in the webinars we've hosted so far, about leadership and leadership culture. How has this pandemic, this process, changed our expectations of leadership?
Well, look, that's a great question, and I think that is ultimately going to be the response not just of retail, but society in general. And the answers I don't think we know yet. What I hope is that some of the trends that we were seeing before this crisis, particularly actually among organisations in the United States, and then from leaders such as Paul Polman, the former chief executive of Unilever, was a kind of move towards understanding that there were more stakeholders around business than just shareholders, and actually there were other constituent parts that businesses had an obligation and a responsibility to take into account when they were determining their strategy and the way that they wanted to interact with society, I guess. And what I would hope is that potentially this crisis, again, as I mentioned earlier, I see an opportunity for some good to come out of this, potentially this crisis, that we see an acceleration of that trend, and consumers and colleagues, those of us working in business and in organizations, will demand that the companies that we interact with, either the ones that we give our business to or the ones that we work with, think very hard about their purpose. And for that purpose to be beyond the profit of that organization, and for actually, for it to be very, then to consider much more strongly the impact on the humans they touch, their colleagues, their customers, everyone within their space. And I think, fingers crossed, that could well be what comes out of this. I think what's been clear to me, and I know we'll talk about this a little bit later in terms of how my own sort of world has reset, or my own thought process has reset, but it's made me rethink very hard back to the last financial crisis in 2008 and our response as a society, where all the sort of economic and cultural data now suggests that it really was the hardest hit who bared the brunt of the economic reset around the meltdown of the financial system in 2008, 2009. And I think that we have an obligation as leaders, whether we're in politics, whether we're in business at the moment, to make sure that doesn't happen again. Look, I think that's going to be critical if we're going to come out of this in a better place than we went into it.